What's up, gangsters? It is a bright October 2018 morning out here at Rube Goldberg Enterprises. The sun is shining, and this is kind of a monumental day, at least in the context of my YouTube channel. Not at all in the context of things that really matter, but for me, a little bit of a big deal. This might be a 10 minutes of random video, but maybe not, because it may end up being longer than 10. I don't know. I'm just going to let it flow. The fact is that this is episode 200 of my model making bullshit. And I'm kind of... I've been thinking about making this episode for a couple of days now, or a week maybe, and I've actually got other episodes in the can that I don't want to publish until I do episode 200, and thinking about what I wanted to say and all that. But the truth is, it's really not a big deal, and I decided I just needed to just go with it and say whatever I thought and felt, because, that's the deal. Ain't nobody getting paid here, so I can do that. This is kind of a weird deal to me, because for those of you who haven't followed my nonsense from the beginning, you may not know this, but at this point in October of 2018, I am almost exactly 4 years into this thing. I did build models as a kid pretty seriously. I mean, I was way too serious for what any 10, 11, 12-year-old boy should be. But growing up on a farm out in the middle of nowhere, I didn't have shit else to do, and I was into it. I loved airplanes, and I found a book at the Clovis Community College library that was all about model making, and I would go to the bookstore on Sundays after my parents made me go to church and look for copies of Fine Scale Modeler, and I was just enthralled by what I saw these guys doing. And I did that until I was, probably 13, maybe 14, and started to get into BMX, and from that point on, it was all, two wheels and girls. And I didn't come back to model making until 2011. And that was purely as a result of me thinking that it would be a good way to help rehabilitate my hand function after the spinal cord injury that I suffered in 2009. And so I bought a Hasegawa 132nd Mustang, which in retrospect was the worst possible choice. It's literally one of the worst kits in the history of kits, as far as I know. And it took me about 3 years off and on to build that thing. And I finished it up around December of 2014. And in the process of finishing it up, I realized that if I was going to do it to what I felt like was a standard that was acceptable and worthy of the 3 years of effort that I had put into it, that I was going to have to buy some tools and learn some stuff. And that's when I made a conscious decision to join a forum and watch some YouTube channels. And next thing I know, I'm buying tools. And somewhere in there, about this time in 2014, I made a conscious decision to do a YouTube video. And I kind of felt like, this looks like it's going to be a thing. I think I'm going to enjoy this, and I like learning and sharing. It's just kind of my nature. When I was racing motocross, I put on riding clinics for beginner riders on motocross fundamentals. When I was working as a photographer, I did some consulting with people to help them with their own photography businesses. My employment history has quite a bit of consulting type stuff in it. And, for whatever reason, it's just how I'm wired. It's just my nature, and I enjoy doing it. And so at a certain point there, I made a conscious decision to create a YouTube channel and just have a conversation. I didn't really have any expectations for getting subscribers. I never have cared about monetizing it. I've never done that, and I never will. Earning 69 thousandths of a cent per view just doesn't have any appeal to me. And then because then I might actually have to start doing some work. I might actually, if I felt like I was getting paid for this, I might actually have to start caring what some people thought. Those few people who rag on me about my videos being too long, or, weird noises that I make with my face or whatever, I might have to actually care about their opinion. But that's the nice thing about just doing it for free and just treating it as a conversation. I can give zero fucks. And I do. I figure, if people want to watch, then cool. If they don't, that's fine with me too. I don't, it doesn't matter to me. This is just a conversation with my model making buddies. I certainly did not expect that it would result in some of the things that it has. I guess there's like 8,500 subscribers on here now. I don't hardly ever look at that number. But I appreciate it. I do. I appreciate that, that many people have at least, sort of felt like it was worth, checking out and continuing with. But I also know the real story behind YouTube views and subscription numbers. I mean, I have, some multi-100,000 views on my channel, but the truth is that all you have to do to get a view on a YouTube video is just open the page. And that's a view. That says nothing about how long somebody actually stays to watch. And the average viewing length on mine, I think, last time I looked, was like 3 minutes or something. And given how long-winded I tend to be, that's pretty pathetic. So I just don't care about those numbers. I don't get fooled by that. They don't fire my ego at all. What does fire my ego, I guess, is when I get a message from somebody that says, "Hey man, I really appreciate the effort you go to, the thoroughness of your presentation, the detail. It's really helped me with my own model making, and keep up the good work." Those kind of things are what mean a lot to me, because look, nobody learns in a vacuum. At least not. At least we don't learn the best ways to do things. And there are better ways to do things. You might get by on stuff that you figure out all by yourself, but if you're operating in a vacuum, you never really know how effective that is compared to what other people are doing at it who may be getting better results. So, I like that. It's important to me. I'm glad that there are people who have found my content to be useful and who have increased their own skills and their own enjoyment of model making in the process. I mean, that's gratifying to me. So, at any rate, that's kind of how it got started and how I'm here at episode 200, which is really kind of surreal to me. I look back at that entire catalog and I'm like, man, I don't even remember some of the shit that I said, which is probably a good thing. Some of those should probably be redone. I don't know. I mean, there are certainly things that have evolved, as you will, when you go down the road of learning. I guess that's why they call it being a journeyman. I've evolved a lot. When I think back to some of the episodes that happened when I built that Hasegawa Mustang, I'm like, man, I can't believe that thing even got finished. But it is still sitting on my shelf, and it always will be because of what it represents. But I remember the failures that I had, while I was working on it, and learning about Vallejo paint, for example, and fighting with it and going through the same journey that everybody seems to with that stuff, where you think, oh, it's really nice because they have lots of colors and I can just squirt it out of the bottle into my airbrush. And yeah, we know that's not true. I mean, you have to learn this whole voodoo dance and hold your tongue properly if you want to have any success with that stuff. And so I've evolved through a bunch of different paints. And so, being that one of the things that I want to talk about here is that evolution and what my favorite things are now, I have to say, you can see behind me there, lots of MRP up there on my shelf. I am pretty much completely a lacquer guy. I eventually upgraded my spray booth from the shitty little folding one that I initially had that vented back into the room to a 22-inch Pash or Posh or Pache or however you say it. I was going to turn the camera over there so you could see it, but whatever, I'm not going to do that. Anyway, it's a giant thing, and it's got a vent that goes out the roof, and it's 270 CFM, and it's good because it enables me to shoot lacquers without getting myself completely high. And so that's primarily what I use. I mean, but I also, as I've said on various occasions, what I love about MRP is that it's great right out of the bottle. And I love that convenience. It is truly an out-of-the-bottle paint. I mean, yeah, you may find yourself wanting to reduce it for certain specific things, but 90% of the time, it's eyedropper in, drop it in the paint cup, boom, done. And I love being able to mix it on the fly to get get tonal variation. It cleans out of the airbrush super easy. I mean, when I'm working with metallics and I'm going like from a white aluminum to a MRP super silver or whatever, I don't even clean between swaps. I just blow out the one I was using, squirt the new one in, blow it till I know that I'm at, till that's what's, coming out of it, and move on. And then I actually clean the airbrush when I'm done. And I only do a field strip I don't know, every month or two, whatever it ends up being. My basic rule has become run the shit out of the airbrush until it sprays funny, and then take it apart and clean it. And I really feel like that using lacquers has been a big part of enabling me to do that. I've learned, I learned along the way about using lacquer thinners, specifically Mr. Leveling Thinner, to thin other paints as well. Like Tamiya works much better with the stuff. The Guns, Mr. Hobby, which is almost exactly like Tamiya, also works really good. Obviously, all the lacquers, like Mr. Color, those can be thinned beautifully with Mr. Leveling Thinner. Basically, Mr. Leveling Thinner is unicorn tears. I mean, the stuff is just fantastic. I've experimented with it on a lot of paints, and you'd be amazed. There are even people who are thinning ammo paints with the stuff. It's just fantastic. I also have, evolved through primers. I have never relented on my belief that priming is just something that good craftsmen do. And I have evolved through several of them, and now almost 80% of my priming is Mr. Surfacer 1500 that's thinned 50-50 with Mr. Leveling Thinner. Works great. Goes on so beautifully. But I also use the Badger primers, their Stynylrez stuff, sometimes, because that also is good. It's an acrylic, a little tougher to clean out of your airbrush, but it's good stuff. And so that's become another one of my staples in my process. I've also run into some tools along the way that I just really love that deserve a mention. I've got a pair of Gundam Planet nippers over here, these things, that are now going on probably 2 years old, maybe 3, I don't know, I can't remember, but I use the bejesus out of these things. I don't baby them. People say, "Oh, don't cut sprue with them." I'm like, whatever. I need to cut some sprue. These are handy. These are the single bladed design, meaning that they have an anvil on one side and a blade on the other side, and they slice and dice like a boss. Far better than any other nipper. I mean, I had my day where I thought Zurons were awesome. Pfft, please. The only thing I use my Zurons for anymore is like cutting chunks of resin off. Like they're good for lopping off a resin pour stub, or I'll cut wire with them. My poor Zurons, they basically have turned into the redheaded stepchild of the house. But my Zuron photo etch shears, fantastic, indispensable. Couldn't live without these things. That right there. I mean, all the guys talk about, oh, I just cut my photo etch on a sheet of glass. Well, look, first of all, dumb. Using glass as a cutting board, I mean, come on, seriously. There are a few things that I think are as silly as that. If you want to make your knife blade dull immediately, yeah, go ahead and drag it across a piece of ceramic. I mean, does it not occur to people that ceramic is what you use to sharpen a knife blade when when you do it properly, like lay it over at an angle? But yeah, people persist in their habits. I have a little piece of ultra high molecular weight polyethylene that I got from a plastic supply house as a sample coupon. That makes a wonderful cutting board. This is the same material that those cutting boards you can buy at Walmart are made out of. So, get you one of those, or get you a bamboo cutting board, or something that's actually made for cutting. Anyway, love all those things. I have some other favorites, some of them more recent. I have really fallen in love with these Infini sanding sponge sticks. You can see the abrasive on them is just really high quality. And one of my favorite things is that it says right there on the thing what grit it is. I know some people think that's stupid, but I like knowing what I'm picking up, because I'm not always going to look close enough to see what the grit looks like compared to the other ones in my little container over there. And I like knowing that I'm making a progression, because that's how you avoid having scratches in your finish, is a disciplined progression through the grits. And you learn things along the way. People talk about like micro mesh. Oh, like it's some kind of holy grail. Look, as I've said before, micro mesh makes up their own grit numbers. There is no such thing as a 12,000 grit, okay? They basically made up those grits to make you think you're getting something better than what you really are. Truthfully, I only know of one source, in fact, for an actual 5,000 grit as per the grit standards. I mean, there are grit standards. There's European ones, there's Japanese ones, there's Chinese ones, there's American ones. And 3M makes a 5,000 grit product called Trizac that auto body finishers will use. So, yeah, I can go nuts on grit. Speaking of things that you use sanders for, I guess, was I actually speaking of that? That was kind of a weird segue. Anyway, I've also evolved a bit with my fillers. My number one filler, for the most part, is this jar of goop right here. I hope it's still looks good. This is my jar of sprue goo, which is basically just nothing but Tamiya and Hasegawa sprue chopped up and dissolved in Tamiya Extra Thin. And I've added a little bit of green paint to it to make it easy to see on gray plastic. I use Tamiya and Hasegawa because when you mix up sprue goo, you ideally want it to behave like good plastic, and that is good plastic. People ask what's the ratio? I don't know what the ratio is. I mix mine until it stops being stringy. I add some sprue and some extra thin. I wait a few days, check it out. If you pull the brush out and it's stringy, add some more extra thin until it stops doing that. And that's when, to me, it works good. People are like, "Yeah, it takes forever to dry." No, it doesn't. That's if it does, you're using too much. I give it basically overnight before I start working on it. And I love sprue goo because it is actual styrene, so it scribes and rivets just like native material, because it is. And it welds to the base surface for the same reason that a lacquer will. It actually etches and bites into the styrene that you're adding it to. So good stuff. I like it. Other things that have kind of become a staple part of my process. Up until recently, I was using this Iwata Neo TRN1 as my mainstay airbrush, day in, day out. I mean, I use and abuse this thing like crazy. People talk about the Neo being lower quality because it's made for Iwata by somebody in China. I don't know how much of that is true. All I can tell you is this thing has been bulletproof, rock solid for going on 3 years now. It works great. It's easy to clean up. It performs consistently. I just really don't have any issues with it. It's just a good, solid airbrush. I did screw up the nozzle once because I bonked it on my bench top, ironically enough, while I was cleaning it. Yeah, and I had to get a new nozzle, but that's it. That's literally the only piece I've ever replaced in this thing. It's been good. Now I say was because a guy who's a member of Scale Modeler's Critique Group wanted me to try Grex airbrushes because he sells them. So he arranged for them to send me this Grex Tritium, and I've been using it as promised for about a month now. And it also is a fantastic airbrush. I prefer the trigger style because I have these obvious dexterity issues, and a traditional double action just doesn't work that well for me. So, this thing has been really good. No surprises there. Grex is a good company. They make quality products, and I will be doing a full review video on that thing at some point in the near future. So those are a few of my favorite things. I mean, I have a ton of stuff. I mean, I love trying products. You guys know that. I love testing. I love figuring out what's going to work the best. And, I honestly do that because it satisfies my own curiosity. I mean, I will do days and weeks of testing nothing but chrome paints because I want to know. And if somebody asks, I want to be able to give a good answer. So I will, wear myself out to do something like that to satisfy myself. And I figure, well, if I'm going to do it, I might as well share the information with you guys. And hence you get things like the 3 hours of the Chrome Showdown series. So anyway, I don't know. I could talk a lot about a lot of the stuff that's here on the shelf behind me, but that would just get way too long. Other things have happened. In my journey over the last 4 years, in 2015, I fell in with a couple of other reprobates, Matt McDougall and Jim DeCesar, and we started the Scale Modelers Critique Group on Facebook, and boy, has that been an adventure. We kind of started it as a lark because we felt like that there was a hole in the market, so to speak, that most every Facebook group for modelers was basically a show and tell. And we wanted a group that was way more show and talk about. And boy, do we. There are days when we'll have 100 comments on a post about what's the best sprue cutter, or what's the best way to do chipping, or whatever it is. And I love that. I'm a firm believer in learning the techniques and learning the materials, and that knowledge is power. And that really is what we focus on in Scale Modelers Critique Group, is the the craftsmanship and, trying to learn and historic references. I mean, it is the nerdiest of all of the Facebook model making groups that I've encountered. The others are fine. I mean, there's lots of casual modelers out there who don't want to go that in depth on any of it. They just want something neat on their shelf. They want a recipe. They want to knock it out and not, get bogged down for days with putting, wiring in a cockpit or assembling individual link tank tracks or whatever. And that's cool. That's fine. Everybody does their hobby for their own reasons. But what's fun for most of us in the Scale Modelers Critique group is the sickness of really going deep and intense with all of it. And so that's the group we've built, and it's got like 10,000 people in it now, which is weird because we thought maybe a few hundred when we started it. Granted, a very small fraction of those people actually participate, but that's the way it is with any kind of internet forum. The important thing is that the people that do participate are hardcore. We kind of treat it like a live action magazine, and the core group of contributors are like contributors, and the three of us that run it are like the editors of the magazine, and we try and curate the content appropriately. What we don't do is try to be the group for everybody. We like to allow people to be themselves, for men to be men. So we practically encourage profanity. We love shenanigans. We like the rough humor. We like to keep it fun and light. We don't take ourselves too seriously. What we take seriously is the work and the craftsmanship. And people who stick around long enough to really understand what's going on can see that. But, we do have some people who don't care for that environment. They don't think it's genteel enough, and that's fine. But, sometimes those folks throw a fit on their way out. And so, one of the things that's happened on my journey is that I've earned some haters and some enemies, and that's fine because maybe it was Mark Twain or Will Rogers or one of those guys who said, if you've got some enemies, you must be doing something right. We kind of view it as a disruptive thing that was needed in the model making community, and we're proud of that. And, the haters, they just provide entertainment. We've had some people go so far as to create hate pages. We had the Scale Modelers Critique Group for a while. Jim, he's a wild man. He's, that dude is a trip for sure. He has his own fan club, and I say fan club loosely. And Matt has done fantastic reviews and things on his YouTube channel, which is Doogs Models. You should check that out. And he gets hate just simply because he gives the straight up no bullshit review of something like a Kitty Hawk kit. And because he's also one of the admins of SMCG. So, we get some guys out there, and it's honestly, it's all great fun because we just laugh. The latest thing is that these guys have started up a page called the Official Scale Modeling Critique Group. And that's literally about as much oxygen as that deserves. It's a thinly disguised swipe at all of us and our group. It's pretty amusing, but hey, that's fine. If there are people who want to go participate in that and they think that's the better thing, that's cool. We don't care. We're going to continue to do the things that we do, and that train is not going to slow down. So that's been fun and interesting. It is truly amazing to me, and I've mentioned it a few times here on my channel. It is truly amazing to me how bent out of shape some people get over this stuff. I mean, I can say something like Vallejo surface primer is garbage, and people just lose their minds. They get totally personal about it. It's like they own stock in Vallejo, or they created the recipe for it themselves. And they don't recognize that that's just me stating my opinion. Yeah, it sounds like I'm stating it as a fact, but for me, it is a fact. I've worked with the stuff enough to know that as a primer, and you measure it, when you measure it against what I think are the 10 jobs that a primer should do competently to be considered a good one, it's a fail. It's just not a good primer at all. It doesn't, anyway, I'm not even going to get into that. Point being is that I rarely will say something in such general or absolute terms. But there are 3 or 4 products over the course of my model making history that I've come to that conclusion about. They're just junk, and I wouldn't trust them for anything. Vallejo Surface Primer being one, Future being one. It's just not consistent. I know, it's cheap. Dudes love it. Whatever, that's fine. But I'm not going to risk the hard hours that I put into doing this stuff on a product that's not guaranteed, by my experience, to work every single time, especially when it comes to paint. I have no patience for something that works most of the time. It's just not going to happen. Another one that's failed me badly is the All-Clad ALC 309 microfiller primer. If you guys go back through some of my episodes, I had major problems with that stuff, and I gave it a fair shake. I used it twice, same problem both times, where it seemed like the filler agglomerated into clumps, and it left the surface, instead of the beautifully buttery smooth thing that I was expecting, as something that looked like a 14-year-old boy who's been eating chocolate bars for 3 meals a day every day and has acne all over his face. I mean, that it was really terrible. And I ended up having to strip the thing, and it was bad. So what I've relegated my All-Clad primer to, actually, is a great new purpose. I keep it in this bottle right here because it is a lacquer and it is very hot. And so what I will do is I use this as a final filler in cases where, like say I'm using a lacquer-based primer like Combi or Bondo 907, which are 2 of my favorites. They tend to be a little porous, not nearly as porous as some junk like Squadron. Yep, that's another one. But, you'll get these little pits and bubbles in the surface, or you might get a ghost seam because, the putty is softer than the surrounding material, and when you sand it, you just end up with a low spot that you just can't ever get rid of, right? I mean, I know a lot of you guys have experienced that as well. This stuff is great because you can just, it ends up being basically just really thick, high build liquid filler, lacquer filler. So I just take and brush some of that on there, give it like 30 minutes to harden, sand it down, works perfect every time as that last a little bit of filler. And because it's got that little tiny brush in there, it can work real precisely. So that's been good. I don't know why my nose is so itchy today. Whatever, must be all the cocaine I'm on. No, I'm not. I'm not. I swear. But yeah, there have been a few things that I have found that are just junk, and they mostly revolve around paint. Because that ends up being, for me, the most important part of the process. I like the building part. I like the detailing part. But I love the painting and weathering part. And that's what I have figured out over the course of my work that really makes me happy. Doing something that is, glossy and tight and perfect is cool, but it's just super stressful. The results are fun, but man, it just wears me out along the way. What I really like, the part that I feel like I'm leading up to, the foreplay for months and months, is that few days or week or whatever of oil paint rendering and weathering that I get to do at the end. The smell of ammo or AK pigment fixer, that sort of diesel smell as I'm working, the dirt and the dust and the oil spills and the leaks and the exhaust stains. I've figured out that's my happy place. That's what I work for. And I think that my work reflects that. My work, I feel, has progressed a lot. I've learned so much in the last 4 years of doing this, and I owe that to other people who have been willing to share. I've become acquainted with some really, really good model makers who are also really good at explaining stuff. Mike Rinaldi, surely you guys have heard of him. His books are wonderful. He makes an occasional appearance on the Scale Modelers Critique Group. He's fantastic. His work is truly world class. Guys like Carlos Starton, another one of my favorite model makers. Peter Buckingham, he's a true gentleman and a world-class model maker. Jim, Matt, and all the guys on SMCG who are hardcore builders. I have learned so much from those guys. And the truth is, when Jim said, hey, let's do this group thing, I was like, you know what? This could be a really good way for me to get better. I won't lie. That was one of my main motivations for agreeing to get into it. And it's paid off. I feel like my work has come a long way. I've been fortunate enough to have a few of my pieces appear in Tamiya Model Magazine International. That's been pretty flattering and cool. Those guys are good. Marcus Nichols is the editor of that thing and does a good job. He's busier than a one-arm wallpaper hanger, but he does a good job of getting a nice magazine out every month. And I've done a commission job. If you followed the B25 2.0 adventure, you know that. That was extremely flattering to have somebody who found me via YouTube come to me and say, hey, I'd like you to do some work for me. And I'm continuing with him. He's proven to be a fantastic client. But I'm not all about being a commission builder. It is super stressful. It's slave wages. By the time you average it out per hour, and I'm just, I've had other people offer to buy stuff I've done and ask me if I want to build stuff, and I'm just like, yeah, even if you agree to the prices I'm going to charge you, because I believe in getting paid fairly. I just don't really want to make my model making life all about doing commissions. So that's probably not going to happen much. But it's been cool. It's been a really cool journey, and I want to say a heartfelt thank you to everybody who has been a part of that journey along the way, who has helped me and answered my own questions, and who has offered encouragement and just made me feel like this was worthwhile and worth doing, and has continued to make it fun for me. And hopefully you'll all still be around at 300 episodes. I think I'll get there. I don't know. Who knows? But at any rate, I see no end in sight. And as always, I want to close this thing out by saying that it's much appreciated and that it is much love. For the little slideshow of the work that has accumulated over the last 4 years, in some small way or even in some large way, there's a lot of you out there who have participated in making it what it's become for me. And when I say it's much appreciated and that it's with much love, that's genuine. That's the real deal. So I'll close it out with a little bit of an overview of what I've accomplished over the last 4 years, and I'll look for you at episode 201.